Uluslararası komplonun 25. yılına girerken Kenya, Nairobi'de medya haber ekibi komplonun izini sürmeye devam ediyor. Ve bu izi sürerken çok önemli bir isimle karşılaştık. Willy Mutunga 2000'li yıllarda kendisi burada Kenya'da Adalet Bakanlığı görevindeydi. Ayrıca Önder Apo'nun Kenya'dan kaçırıldığı dönemlerde de Kenya'nın ulusal insan hakları organizasyonunda üst düzey görevli bir yetkiliydi. Kendisine şimdi sorularımızı yönelteceğiz. Could you please introduce yourself first of all?
My name is Willy Mutunga, and my background is in teaching law at the University of Nairobi in the 70s, and then human rights activism, you know, in the 80s, 90s. I was involved in the constitution making processes, monitoring human rights violations in this country. And in 1999, when Ocalan was abducted from here, I was working for one of the leading human rights organizations in this country, called the Kenya Human Rights Commission. I also worked a bit for the Ford Foundation until 2011, when I became the Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, and I served in that capacity for 5 years. So I retired in June 2016.
Can you tell us about Kenya's political background very shortly?
It's a history of our people being free, you know, until the British, you know, get here in 1895. Although before that they had explorers come in and explore rivers and stuff in the country. Always the part of the, you know, imperialist occupation. So the British declared Kenya a colony in 1920, and we were occupied and colonized until 63. And that colonization and occupation, you know, it's the normal, the abnormal, you know, occupation and colonization, where your lands are stolen, where you have no freedoms at all. And it was in resistance to British colonialism and imperialism that from 1952 to 1957, we had our own Ocalan, a guy called Field Marshal Kimathis, and he was a leader of what has come to be called the Land and Freedom Army that fought the British from the, you know, from the forests. And, you know, Kenya was bombed, okay, and the people were placed in, you know, in villages and so forth. And Kimathis himself was arrested and executed on the 18th of February 1957. So we are celebrating his execution, actually the coming weekend on Saturday. But it was basically because of the armed struggle that there was also a parallel constitutional struggle, you know, for independence, and that was negotiated with the, you know, with the British, and we became independent in December 12th, 1963, and we became a republic on December 12th, 1964, and then since then the struggles have continued, because we realized that we were not free from imperialism, People didn't get their lands back. The issue of freedom and rights was also an issue, and the struggle continued. The people have taken the view that wherever there is occupation, there is oppression, injustice, there must be resistance, and you see those parallel, struggles.
How did you heard about Mr. Ocalan, and what was your position when Ocalan was here in Kenya?
Yeah, I heard about Ocalan when actually in a mosque. There is a mosque called Medina, which I go to, and after the sermon, the khutbah, somebody announced that Ocalan actually is in the country, and they didn't say, that he was abducted, or we didn't know anything about what he was doing. In fact, a lot of us were kind of excited to see whether we could meet him and so forth. But as a Kenya Human Rights Commission, we also interested because we knew of him, we regarded him as a freedom fighter. And so during that particular period, we actually didn't get to know where he was. We didn't get to know what was happening, okay? And it's after a few days that everything unfolded, that actually he had been abducted from here and taken to, to Turkey. And there were just rumors, around that, in my view, when you analyze those rumors, it's very, very clear that he was tricked to come here, all right? And, while he was here, then there was this conspiracy, there must be a conspiracy of abducting him and flying out of this country. And during those discussions, that followed, there was a lot of, there was this specific rumor that was, I remember very, very clearly, implicating the then president of Kenya as having been paid off, to be part of that, conspiracy. Those were, of course, rumors, but you and I know, okay, that kind of thing didn't happen without the enemies of Ocalan and his party being involved. Whether it's Western imperialism working with the Kenyan government to make sure he was abducted. History records so many of those incidents where, freedom fighters are tricked and, captured by their enemies. And as I always wonder, why did he come to Kenya? Because Kenya, given his enemies, was the wrong place, to be in. There's no way this country, under the government and the dictatorship in place in 1999, would have protected him.
Who was the dictator at that time?
It was President Daniel Arap Moi. In a lot of civilized countries, there will be a law to protect you. And you would imagine if he was in Kenya illegally, that he would be taken to court and charged for being, illegally in Kenya. That didn't happen. Okay, he was here and then disappeared. Okay, and the judicial system was not used at all.
Anything else you remember from that first days that you heard about Ocalan?
The Greeks were implicated. The Turks were, implicated. Okay.
So that was what the community was.
That's what they are saying, because the discussion was, how did he get here? Okay, and people would say, oh, he was a guest of the Greeks. Okay, and then what happened? Oh, the Turks got involved, and it was very, very clear that the abduction was by the Turks. Okay, during those rumors and so forth. So, but I'm calling them rumors because it's something that happened very quickly. We know he's in the country, and the next thing then we read from international media what happened to him. So there will be some people in Kenya who would know. Obviously, the intelligence systems in Kenya would definitely know. Okay, the fact that the president people say he was involved and so forth, that also makes sense to me. Okay, and the enemies of Ocalan and his party, in my own, analysis, were involved. There was some international and national conspiracy, to get him abducted.
What was the discussions at the government, this side, after the Öcalan was here? Was there any news from the officials, like in the parliament? Did somebody give a speech?
Parliament was quiet, the media was quiet, and in Kenya, if you lived in Kenya during that period, when the media is not saying anything, the government is not saying, institutions are not saying anything, the person hasn't been brought to court. Okay? During that period, it was clear to all of us activists that this was an international and national conspiracy to abduct him from Kenya. Because as I've said, he is here, and then the next thing is a captive of the Turks, right? So the media in 1999 was very cowardly. Okay, so it wasn't covered. There was no in 1999, although there was an opposition party, didn't raise that issue.
So the opposition party didn't say nothing?
No, they didn't say it.
What was the opposition party's name that time?
It was in 1999. There were various opposition parties because we were a one-party dictatorship until 1991.
So what was the leading one? Let's say
the leading one was a coalition.
The coalition.
Yeah, the coalition would have.
Opposition coalition.
Yeah, it would have been Democratic Party of Kenya, the Ford. There were two Fords, Ford Asili and Ford Kenya. Those were the major ones. And I don't remember a statement from anyone except in the human rights movement that sought basically to know what happened, and there were no responses.
The human rights movement, you at this time was asking and making researches about Öcalan.
Yeah, we wanted as a human rights organization in Kenya and connected to other human rights organizations globally to know what happened. Okay,
Did you get any answer from someone?
No answer from anyone. And that thickened it's kind of validated this conspiracy theory that this is a freedom fighter. There is a party, and the Kurdish people are involved in it. And we were, of course, aware of the politics, around this particular issue. So for him just to be in the country out of the blue, that is frightening. And it's also, even I remember we were asking, was he kidnapped from where he was and brought here? There were all these questions being asked by people, and we never got answers.
Why do you think Öcalan being captured and kidnapped in Kenya, and by who? Who was get involved in that process?
We've first of all, it's good you asked about Kenya's political trajectory, okay? What I didn't say is that since independence, we have had governments that are actually enslaved by, Western imperialism. That's a fact. Actually, we always say that although we're supposed to be independent, the British never left. They are still here, ruling us, meaning the West. And when we talk about the West, we're talking about, of course, America, okay, and Europe. And their interests here are paramount. We call Kenya an anchor state in that sense, okay? So, that's what, in unraveling this issue of Abdullah Ocalan, we should bear in mind that he was coming to a country which he shouldn't have, been because of the enemies, to his movement and to his leadership. Okay, it's like going to a lion's den. That's why we were wondering, was he captured in some place and he was just en route, to some other place. And so that's the state of the government here. And I think if you were to look at the real culprits who should tell us what happened, to this great freedom fighter, in terms of Kenya, you will have to deal with the intelligence. There is no doubt that the intelligence, the Kenyan intelligence knew. Okay?
So the Kenya intelligence plus which ones they work with?
Well, the Kenyan intelligence works hand in glove with the CIA, FBI, MI6, or Mossad, without a doubt. Okay, and there is a history of those collaborations. Yeah, those intelligence services have a great presence in this country. That's what I'm saying. Whether it's Mossad, FBI, CIA, MI6, and others from, of course, the European countries. They will be present here. And that's why I was saying, if you are going to unravel this issue, the real culprits, the real culprits will be first to identify who the enemies of the Kurdish movement and Ocalan are, all right? And once you identify them, you will find that they were represented by various institutions here. And those are the people who, even in 1999, we were basically saying, those are the ones who are accountable. You should tell us, as a Kenyan people, what happened. Yeah. Because it's, when you look at it, and I now look back to it, it's very scary. Okay, it's like hearing somebody, a freedom fighter who is fighting for a particular cause, and then you find him in a place where he shouldn't be. That's why we thought, well, he must have been captured. And this abduction that happened to Kenya is, in my own view, was as a result of serious national, that's us, and the international, conspiracies that had designed this, capture, and they made sure he was in a country that will facilitate, the front pages were just rehearsing what they took from the international media. It wasn't anything that special. They and our media does that very much. They can pick stuff from Al Jazeera. They can pick it from British newspapers, from everywhere. As far as I remember, I don't remember even the government accepting that Ocalan was here. There was no, no acknowledgement. As I said, it's reading the international press after this happens, the abduction. and the kidnapping, all right? But internally, as I said, the opposition political parties, parliament didn't raise it. The only people who are raising it were the human rights people, the human rights movement, okay? Because, kidnapping people, denying their rights, them of their rights, is something that the national human rights movement would raise. So it was a lone voice in the wilderness, just that community, the community of human rights activists.
The government didn't say nothing.
No,
and
no.
Parliament was silent.
No, they didn't respond, as far as I remember. The strategy then, I remember, of the human rights organization is initially we didn't believe that he had been, kidnapped and taken out. So the mobilization and asking questions was on the basis that he could still be in Kenya, right? Because when you look at what the human rights movement was talking about, was basically if he's around, he has rights, to a fair trial or whatever, right? So it was confined to finding answers, from the government and from everybody else. But I think immediately we discovered that the abduction had taken place. That was confirmed. And I remember we got confirmations from our own links with other human rights groups, worldwide, because that's easy when you have those networks and partnerships. They basically told us that this was an abduction. He's no longer, in Kenya. And I think we continued a bit in terms of, asking the government to explain. But you are quite right. If Parliament had asked it, or if the media had joined us, there would have been a great response. And that's what makes the whole notion of conspiracy deepen, all right? Because in this country, when you find that the media are not taking up anything, the politicians are not saying it, the government is not saying anything, then you get the impression that they are either involved, okay, or they don't want to, talk about it.
Did Kenya give Mr. Abdullah Ocalan in any under threat, or what was the threat, if there was a threat to Kenya by international powers?
Well, there was a rumor that the president was handsomely paid, but Kenya is a country of rumors, my friend. So sometimes, those rumors say a lot. It's what we call a rich grapevine, where people get to get this information through other, sources. But it could have been, in my own analysis, yes, money being paid to the president. I also think that the intelligence agencies we are talking about don't need to pay anybody. They can actually hand over somebody, without the president being paid anything, because of that, that connection, that this is the enemy of our interests, and so forth and so forth. And then they trade, and that is always illegal. You know that. There's no way Kenya was going to resist.
For anything.
Those foreign intelligence forces and backed by their own governments? No. It's there is a whole history of our governments succumbing to situations like that. So there's a parallel. There's a parallel of here of our governments and the institutions not complying with international law, doing things secretly, and that in my books was an illegal and unconstitutional abduction.
As a judge, do you think giving Ocalan, capturing Ocalan was under the law? Was it legal to give someone that came to Kenya?
Yeah, the law side is pretty clear. If Ocalan was coming to Kenya and he was allowed in and he had a visa, that abduction, would have been, illegal. That's right.
Kidnapping?
Yes, yes. And it's a criminal offense. Those involved could be prosecuted, under our laws, okay? And there also the aspects of, international law that don't allow us to, to treat a citizen of another country, in that manner. And I think that the reason why everything happened so quickly is because during that period, and as of now, Kenya has had and still has a law where you can actually very quickly run to court and say that the person should be produced. The government should produce that person, okay? So they knew that. They knew that, the human rights groups might file those applications. So that's why it was done, in my view, so quickly and secretly, so that the legal system here could not really help. Yeah.
Lastly, anything else we didn't ask, anything you would like to say, and anything you remember from that time or just after it? So please, your last words.
Yeah, the only thing I can, this particular issue tells me whenever I discuss it with young people and so forth, is that it's so important to understand the planet we live in now, okay? And the number of the various breaches of laws, that take place, and that our planet definitely, needs change. And when you see freedom fighters, like Ocalan, for example, in the world, okay, the connection, with other struggles becomes very, 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 very strong. Simply because it's not just the Kurds, it's the Kenyans and others that are facing, well, the Palestinians, the Sahrawi people. There are so many people in the world now that are fighting, against the forces that dominate the world now. So for me, this particular issue, when I talk to people about Ocalan, is to bring it to what is happening in the world today, okay, and what we should be fighting for. Okay, he is still fighting his own struggle, but ourselves, those who are free, should surely be fighting for a world that is just in the sense that you can't go kidnapping people and killing people, and again, that's something else. They could have even killed him, and if you're in a country and nobody knows you are there, you can be killed. So it's that the struggle for a world that is just, right? A world that is peaceful, a world that is non-militaristic, because you see there's so much about military activities, everywhere, bombings and so forth, and there is a war now in Ukraine, and we know what's happening in Syria. We can't have that kind of world, anymore. Just like we don't want a world that is racial, that's a world that is sexist, the world that is inequitable in the sense that there are certain forces that dominate others and colonize, others. So it's a world that is also, free We have the issues of ecological, safety. We're talking about that needs to cool down, because when people talk about climate change, a lot of them don't realize that is related to these bombs that are being blown out everywhere.
Most of the points that you're making are Öcalan's ideas as well: the democracy, the peace, the ecology, and the woman freedoms.
Freedom of women. It can't be sexist. There is gender equality, and then the world also should be egalitarian and prosperous.
Anything else you remember from that days when Öcalan was here and then captured?
No, except what what I've said. But I could say this, which I didn't say. It's not the history, not that the issue of Ocalan has died in this country. It hasn't. It's always being talked about. Yeah, it's always being talked about, although the details are not clear, okay, but Kenyans and even young people, remember exactly what happened. So what he fights for cannot be disengaged from, the struggles of this country, and how ashamed as Kenyans we feel that our government could have traded, a freedom fighter for whatever reason.
So lastly, what is your message for freedom for Öcalan? Lastly, what is your solidarity message with Öcalan?
It's to basically condemn Turkey for as a Kenyan,
And as a judgment.
Yes, violating our laws in this abduction and kidnapping and so forth, all right? So that's the first condemnation, right? Then the second one is that they have to give Ocalan his rights. Okay, they can't. Yes, and the rest of the world should be, calling upon Turkey to respect, international law, and I'm sure they have signed treaties where what they are doing is totally illegal and inhuman, and that would be my call. But my call will also be, to Kenyans, that we've got to be part of the movement that is fighting for its freedom, because that is important. That solidarity, people to people solidarity is very critical in this century. That we can't keep quiet, when there's injustice towards a freedom fighter. And in the case of Kenya, we feel implicated. He was kidnapped from this country.
Anything else you would like to add on? Anything I didn't ask? Anything that you remember from 1999 as well? You can have your last words.
I guess it's the way the South Africans put it when Mandela was in prison, right? Let Ocalan be free. While he's in prison, he has rights as well, and we call upon the Turkish government, to observe, those rights.
So thank you very much. It was really nice to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.